Good to be with you.
Douglas, great moment for John McDonnell, yeah?
I think it was a great moment for George Osborne. It was an extraordinary thing, really, to see and to watch happen in the House of Commons, because, of course, it was sort of understandable how McDonnell got there, and he was in the middle of making what could have been an important and worthwhile point about Chinese British cooperation. But then, of course, as your reporter said, the visible pain on his own benches when it became clear that he regarded the Red Book and indeed Mao as something worth laughing and joking about, when, of course, most people, I think, are aware that Chairman Mao was one of, along with Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, one of the worst, most genocidal rulers in history. And that reading from the little Red Book and making a joke out of it is about as funny as reading out of Mein Kampf and trying to make a joke out of it.
Though, to be fair to George Osborne, he did turn it to his advantage, didn't he, by saying,
sure did.
Look, it's a personal signed copy belonging to the Shadow Chancellor, Conrad. This will now haunt John McDonnell, will it not, throughout the remainder, what's left of his tenure in this position?
I don't think so. I think this will probably blow over, to be honest.
Really? You think so?
I think it probably wasn't the best move tactically, because whenever anyone giving a speech makes reference to any despotic regime, it's a near guarantee that that reference becomes the story.
Are you not expecting to see an image of the Shadow Chancellor holding the little Red Book in every Tory ad from now on?
Well, I think, to be honest, most people probably don't, aren't even aware what the Little Red Book is. It was as Douglas said, he was trying to make a serious point, but I think there is an issue that whenever anyone makes this sort of reference, whether it's a comparison to the Nazis or David Davis saying the Tory trade union bill is like something out of Franco's Spain, this is bound to happen. So not exactly a great leap forwards in terms of communication strategy.
Conrad, could you not have anticipated this?
Well, it's not my job to anticipate.
No, but could you not have anticipated this in advance of attempting that joke that this was not going to fly?
Well, that's what I was saying, yeah, that I think I could personally, but I don't think it's a first. I think there is another issue. In 1974, two Tory MPs actually dressed up as Chairman Mao for one of Dennis Healey's budgets to make a similar attempt at humour. And I think there's actually been a lot of faux outrage in the past few weeks over Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell and the new leadership of the Labour Party. And I think people actually find it rather tiresome, because I think there's all these attacks are being made, and it's sort of they're being judged on a different by their opponents, but also by some sections of the media on a basis that's entirely different to how other politicians are remarked upon. Everything, every sort of the smallest slip up or any attempt at humour is being jumped on, and I think there's some irony here, because over the summer, when the leadership election was going on, there was a lot of people saying the left has no sense of humour. There was even a parody Twitter account called Corbyn Jokes about the fact that Jeremy Corbyn has no sense of humour. And as soon as anyone on the left of the Labour Party, any supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, tries to make a joke, it gets sort of completely taken out of context and jumped on as some sort of outrage.
Douglas, has Conrad got a point there when you look at the polling for Corbyn in recent days and weeks, as he has faced a kind of media onslaught, his polling has gone up?
Well, it may be related, it may not be. It's possible. I mean, British do tend to like an underdog, and there's no greater underdog at the moment than Jeremy Corbyn. But his low ranking in the polls, which it certainly still is dismissed now, very strangely, by supporters of Jeremy Corbyn as being the fault of the media and reporting, rather than the fault of Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell and their colleagues. Now, you see, if after the autumn statement, John McDonnell has to spend 24 hours on the media, as he is currently doing, talking not about George Osborne's budgetary forecasts, but having to condemn the tens of millions of people killed by Mao, you would think, by any stretch of the imagination, that is a bad position for a shadow chancellor to be in.
It is,
and you
but
see, and that is a problem entirely of his own creation. And
well,
it's
it's
the
not
same with
entirely of his own
Jeremy
creation
Corbyn.
because there's
It's
an issue here.
entirely, it is
There's a,
entirely John McDonnell's fault that he waved the red book of Chairman Mao during this debate. It was
But John McDonnell is
entirely John
he's being
McDonnell's
asked over
fault.
the past couple of days. Over the past 24 hours. He's being asked if he condemns the deaths of
Yes.
people in China under Mao. And I mean that's a
Well,
stupid question
Oh
to
no,
ask.
no,
I mean,
no, absolutely
it's,
not. No,
That's not what
absolutely
happened
a
on the
stupid
BBC
question.
last night,
A
Conrad.
very,
he
if I may say so.
actually condemned Chairman Mao's murderous policies without prompting on the BBC last night.
Could I make a point that's very important to make here? It is actually sadly necessary to try to work out whether he's telling the truth or not. We don't know, but work out what John McDonnell's view towards Maoist China actually is and has been. Because, of course, we have to remember that there are people still in the Labour Party, and there certainly have been in the past, who have been perfectly content to gloss over the atrocities of the Communist Party of China. And one very just pertinent example, a few years ago, Diane Abbott was asked who her political heroes were. Diane Abbott, of course, is now a front bench a member of the Labour Party's shadow cabinet. Diane Abbott, a few years ago, was asked about her political heroes. She cited Chairman Mao as being one of them. When pushed on that and asked, well, didn't he kill, perhaps as many as 50 million people or more? She said, but he did so much to bring agriculture in China forward. So actually, this is something that needs to be clarified. Senior Labour Party members in the Corbynista era, we do deserve to know what their attitude is to communist atrocities during the 20th century, because sadly, many people historically in the Labour Party, and maybe some people currently, seem to take at the very least a very glib view of those atrocities.
Conrad.
But this isn't what the issue is here. What John McDonnell was obviously trying to highlight is that this government professes to have an ideological opposition to state ownership, and yet is perfectly happy to hawk off our national assets to the Chinese Communist Party. And my job involves reporting on the trade unions and workplace relations. And there's a lot of serious concerns about how the deal struck up with China over nuclear reactors, and the Hinkley Point nuclear reactor will allow China free rein to cut out UK-based workers in the construction of the new reactor at Bradwell in Essex. And there are other concerns about security, and this is something I think that's a point worth making. It perhaps wasn't made,
but it was pretty cack-handed, wasn't it?
It wasn't. As I said before, I don't think it was the best tactical move because of the way in which any story making reference to someone like Chairman Mao or any despotic regime. That reference then becomes the story. But I think it's absurd to make this into a debate about whether John McDonnell, who is actually anyone of I think Douglas is insulting our intelligence by suggesting that John McDonnell may have sympathy for Chairman Mao, given that his views.
Are you joking?
His
joking?
view. No, I'm talking about John McDonnell. He's a professed anti-Stalinist. He has very clear view. He has very clear view. Anyone who's paid any attention to this, but there's this sort of laziness about how in how the left have been treated, and how in the past few weeks by some sections of the media, that anything will be jumped on and the proper context won't be given.
Well, it means we're all going to be asking Diane Abbott now about that quotation Douglas mentioned.
Could I also just come in on that? Because the fact is that John McDonnell has been an extremely obscure political figure for many years, and most of the British public are only now becoming aware of the murkiness of many of his own political views. And it's inevitable, since this is happening whilst he's on the front bench and is indeed the Shadow Chancellor, that people are surprised by some of the things they're discovering have been going on among the Corbynista and McDonnell camps all these years. A lot of people outside Northern Ireland were not aware, for instance, until a few weeks ago, I wrote about it many years ago, that John McDonnell had ever suggested that people should praise terrorists, for instance. Many people in Britain are amazed that anybody in the Labour Party, let alone somebody who is now the Shadow Chancellor, could ever have praised the terrorists of the IRA. But then it's been occasion after occasion that people have found things like that, and very unpleasant, murky things that the McDonnell-Corbyn wing of the party have believed for years. Let me give you another example. It isn't some kind of right-wing or Murdoch media conspiracy that there are many things that Jeremy Corbyn over his career has done which are now coming to prominence because he is the leader of Her Majesty's opposition. It might amaze many people in Britain, it doesn't for some of us, that Jeremy Corbyn should have been a character referee for somebody accused of trying to blow up British Jewish sites in the 1990s, places where Jews congregate in Britain. It amazes a lot of people. It doesn't amaze those of us who've paid attention to the Corbyn-McDonnell camp, but it is a rightful area of inquiry by the press. If John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn don't want these stories to come out, they shouldn't be waving the Red Book of Chairman Mao as a joke. They shouldn't have been saying that the IRA were admirable terrorists. They shouldn't have been defending people who targeted British Jews for terrorism in the 1990s. Okay. That is the problem, not the media.
On 81771, Nick Pierpoint says this was a political blunder. It's so big it defies belief. Even a political satirist would have been the idea as too far-fetched. Stephen Andrews says McDonnell has put himself in the stickiest position since Sticky the Stick insect got stuck on a sticky bun. Norman, what do you think?
Good afternoon, William.
Good afternoon, Norman.
I thought it was absolutely brilliant for the simple reason it's got people talking now. Here we were a few weeks ago, the royal family, Cameron, sitting down with the Chinese to dinner, rolling the red carpet out for them, and then we talk about China's human rights, and Osborne goes to China. We can't even build our own power stations, yet we can spend 178 billion on weapons of war, but we'll have to get the Chinese to build our power stations. And the manufacturing been sold off to Chinese buyers. The China owns Britain and it owns America. So it does. And the man was right when he threw the Red Book over.
When China is such an important economy, such an important marketplace, and such a powerful country, Norman, shouldn't Britain have a trading relationship with China?
Of course you have a trading with the whole world, William. But why are we getting them to build our power stations? Can the state not build them? With the billions we're spending on our weapons, put it into our power stations, state-controlled, instead of handing it to the private sector and the Chinese. And you look at the austerity in this country, the man was right when he threw the book over. Poor people in this country are being driven into poverty with the austerity that Osborne's putting on the people.
So you don't regard it as a blunder? No blunder in this, Norman?
No, the man
whatsoever.
The aim of the man with the book was to get people talking and get debate about Britain and the austerity and the power stations, and he's achieved that. He wouldn't have achieved it without the Red Book, in my view. They wouldn't listen to him, but now people are talking about it.
Thank you very much, Norman. I suspect, Conrad, you would rather we were talking about that rather than the Red Book.
Well, I think so. I mean, I think it is actually really telling that that while we've been talking about the Red Book, there is Corbyn and McDonnell have in fact forced George Osborne into a humiliating U-turn on tax credits cuts, and that is two fingers up from them to everyone who said that electing Corbyn would be futile. The new Labour leadership has in fact clearly shifted the debate, and let's remember that Liz Kendall, one of Corbyn's opponents, actually argued during the leadership election that Labour should not oppose these cuts to tax credits. And so I think there is, while these sort of little things are being jumped on and blown up into something, mountains are being made out of molehills over these issues, we're actually seeing Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell proving a lot of the criticism that has been made of them wrong.
Yes, but aren't you illustrating the problem? That's what they should be talking about. That's what the public should be talking about. But because of the media cack-handedness on display in the House of Commons yesterday, which John McDonnell has himself acknowledged it was a blunder, because of that, we're talking about that.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that when you introduced this programme, you did actually include the context of it, because when I saw the 10 p.m. news bulletin on the BBC last night, that context was not introduced at all. It was made out that McDonnell was seriously referencing Chairman Mao as some sort of inspiration. And I think there are two sides to this. As I've said right at the beginning, I don't think it was the wisest tactical move because of the ease with which it can be jumped on. But it's that's obviously not the.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.